The film begins with Frank standing on the highway, signaling to cars. One driver stops and gives him a ride. When they reach a gas station on the road, the driver gets out to fill his tank. Frank thanks him for the ride and says, "I must treat you to something to drink." The driver apologizes, saying he's in a hurry, but when Frank insists, he agrees to go with him into the diner attached to the station. There, Frank goes to the bathroom and keeps watching the man who brought him, waiting until he finishes his juice and leaves. Then Frank comes out and sits with Nick, the owner of the diner, and asks him, "My friend who was here, where did he go?" Nick tells him that he left. Frank pretends to be shocked and says, "How did he leave without telling me?" Nick replies, "Maybe he was in a hurry, so he left." Then he brings Frank the food he ordered. Frank eats, and when he finishes, he pretends to look for his wallet and says to Nick, "My friend stole my money from the bag, so I won't be able to pay you, but as soon as I start working, I'll send you the money for the meal." Then he says, "I must go now." Nick asks, "Where are you going?" Frank tells him he's going to Los Angeles to work as a mechanic in one of his friend's garages. At that moment, Nick offers him a job because he needs someone to repair his car and do regular maintenance. Frank asks about the salary, so Nick tells him it's a simple wage, but he will provide him with a place to stay, in addition to eating every day from the hands of Cora, his wife. From his seat, Frank sees Cora preparing food in the kitchen, and because she is very beautiful, it shows that he liked her. Despite that, he refuses Nick's offer, leaves, and stands on the highway again, signaling to the cars to continue his journey, but at the last moment, he changes his mind. The next day, Frank is repairing Nick's car. Shortly after, he takes advantage of Nick being busy with customers in the diner and goes to Cora, asking her for soap to wash his hands. She tells him the soap is finished, so he asks her to make him some coffee. It seems Frank is trying to get closer to her, but she pays him no attention. That same night, the three of them have dinner together. After dinner, Nick and Cora go to their room, while Frank stays in his room across from the diner. From his window, he watches Nick and Cora in their room. The next day, Nick finds the diner sign has fallen and gets very angry. He asks Frank to help him put it back in place. Frank helps him and suggests buying a new neon sign so that cars can see it from afar, which would bring more customers. Nick likes the idea and says he will go to the market to get some supplies for the diner. He takes the car and leaves. Frank takes advantage of the moment, enters the diner, locks the door behind him, and hangs a "closed" sign. Then he goes to Cora and assaults her. That same night, Cora leaves her husband and goes down to Frank's room, but when she hears Nick calling her, she quickly goes back up. The next day, Nick goes again to get supplies, so Cora goes to Frank's room. There, he gives her a choice: either he leaves alone, or she runs away with him and they go live together in Chicago. She agrees, and they escape together, leaving the diner behind. They reach the train station, where Frank sees men gambling. He asks Cora to lend him some money, but she refuses, saying the money she has is compensation for her life with Nick and she will not give it up. He promises he will return the money with profit in just 1 hour, so she agrees and gives it to him. He goes to gamble. When Cora sees him gambling, she realizes she will suffer in her life with him, so she leaves without telling him. Frank wins against one of the players, but the man refuses to give him the money he won. They fight, and Frank manages to take the money. When he returns to Cora, he finds she has disappeared. He asks the ticket clerk, who tells him she took her bag and left. Frank goes back to the diner. When he sees her, he gives her back her money and the money he won, and asks her, "Why did you come back?" She answers, "I had to return because Nick would definitely have looked for me and found me, and then he wouldn't spare either of us. Nothing will save us from him except death." From her words, he realizes she wants him to kill Nick. He hesitates and tells her, "If I do what you want, I'll be executed." She replies, "There is no other solution. If you want me, you must kill him." At that moment, Nick calls her, so she goes upstairs. The next night, workers are installing the new neon sign. They are angry at Nick because he is cheap and refuses to pay the agreed amount, so they leave without finishing the job. Meanwhile, Frank puts small metal balls into a sack and gives it to Cora, who looks tense. He reassures her and says, "Carry out the plan we agreed on. I will stand and watch the road to make sure there are no witnesses." He tells her to turn off all the lights and that when he confirms the road is clear, he will give her the signal with the car horn to kill Nick. She tells him she loves him, then goes up with Nick to their apartment on the second floor above the diner and turns off all the lights. At the same time, Frank brings a long wooden ladder near the electric pole opposite the diner. Then he stands beside the car, ready to give her the agreed signal. Suddenly, he sees a police officer approaching and asking, "Who are you?" Frank tells him he works in the diner and wanted to stand outside for some fresh air before going to sleep because the weather is nice. The officer says, "You're right, I also want to enjoy the weather, but I have work and must go." Meanwhile, Nick is taking a shower with his back to the door. The bathroom is the only place with light in the apartment and the diner. Cora approaches her husband carrying the sack of metal balls. At that moment, Frank gives her the signal, so she hits Nick on the head, and at the same moment, the power goes out in the entire place. Cora screams. When Frank runs up to her, she says, "I hit him, and at the same time the power went out, so I don't know what happened." He calms her down and says, "You must call the police immediately because there was a police officer standing in front of the diner who saw me. We can't get rid of him now." He forces her to go downstairs and call the police. When Frank sees Nick, he finds him unconscious with a big wound on his head. He tries to wake him. After a while, both of them are in the hospital, and the doctor tells Cora that her husband will stay there for 2 weeks until they make sure that his fall in the bathroom did not cause any internal bleeding. On her way back to the diner with Frank, Cora is extremely nervous and says to him, "If Nick had turned around and seen me hitting him, he would have reported me, and we both would have been executed. But the power outage at the exact moment I hit him was in our favor because he'll think he slipped when the lights went out." At that moment, Frank tells her that the police officer is walking behind them. When they arrive at the diner, the officer parks his car and gets out. He sees the wooden ladder and asks Frank where the electrical box is. Frank points it out to him. The officer climbs the ladder and finds a cat electrocuted. Frank tells him that the workers forgot to close the electrical box, which caused a short circuit that killed the cat, and that the power outage is what caused Nick to fall in the bathroom. The officer believes him and leaves. After that, Frank and Cora spend all their time together, whether in the diner or going out. The day before Nick is discharged from the hospital, Cora is extremely upset. But the next day, when Nick is released, Cora throws him a big party and invites Nick's relatives and all their friends. At the party, Cora ignores Frank. He asks her why she's ignoring him, and she tells him she wants to end their relationship. She then goes back to her husband and dances with him, and Frank clearly appears bothered by what's happening. At that moment, Nick thanks her for standing by him during his illness. When he sees Frank standing alone, he calls him over and tells his friends that he owes his life to Frank because he was the one who saved him and drove him to the hospital. After the party ends, they go upstairs to their room, and shortly after, Cora goes down to Frank and finds him packing his bag to leave. She says to him, "Please stay with me. I love you." She is very sad as she tells him that Nick wants to have a child now after he used to refuse the idea, and she says, "I only want to have a child with you," and begins to cry. Frank calms her down and promises he won't leave her. The next day, the three of them go out together. On their way back in the car, Nick is unconscious from drinking. Frank seizes the opportunity and hits Nick on the head with a metal bar he had hidden. Once he's sure Nick is dead, he gets out of the car with Cora and they push the car, which is parked on a hill on the highway. Then both of them go down and stand beside the car to complete their plan. Cora grabs a bottle from the ground and hits Frank with it, and he hits her too so that Nick's death will look like an accident. Frank then gets into the car to make sure Nick is dead, and suddenly the car rolls downhill again into the valley, flipping over several times. Cora screams, runs to the highway, and asks a passing car for help. The next day, Frank wakes up in the hospital and finds the police officer interrogating him. The officer says, "You're accused of killing Nick to take the insurance money with his wife. And this isn't your first case. You have a record of theft and fraud." Frank replies, "I had no motive to kill Nick." The officer tells him that Nick's wife is very beautiful, and that's enough motive to kill her husband, take the insurance money, and live with her afterward. But Frank insists on his innocence and asks, "What do I have to do for you to believe me?" The officer says, "Sign this paper." And Frank signs it. Frank is then taken to prison, where he is visited by a lawyer named Carter. Carter tells him, "I'm the lawyer for both you and Cora," and asks him not to sign any more papers. He informs him that the trial is tomorrow, then leaves. The next day in court, the officer presents the paper Frank signed, it turns out to be a complaint filed by Frank claiming that his injuries happened while Cora was driving the car, and therefore he wants compensation from her. This is considered a statement implying that Cora is the one who killed her husband. Cora is shocked and screams at Frank, asking why he did that. Carter tells the judge that the paper is worthless, especially since they made Frank sign it while he was exhausted, and the court should not accept it. But the judge refuses his argument, so the lawyer announces he is withdrawing from the case. After the session, Cora breaks down and screams as journalists chase her and take photos. She and Frank go into the attorney's room, where she confesses to Carter that she and Frank killed Nick. Then we see someone sitting in the room secretly recording her confession. The next day, Carter goes to the insurance company manager and tells him he will lose the case his company filed against Cora, accusing her of killing Nick to claim his accident insurance. Carter says there is no witness to the incident, and many people can testify that Nick held a party and thanked Frank and Cora in front of everyone for saving his life, which means Frank could not have killed Nick. He also tells him he convinced the owner of a big company to insure all his employees with them, but this will only happen if the insurance company drops the case. The manager agrees and says he will withdraw it. The next day, Carter goes to release Frank from prison and tells him that there are no charges against him or Cora anymore. Frank says, "How? She confessed and the officer recorded her." Carter replies, "The person she confessed in front of was my personal secretary, not a police officer." When they leave prison, Frank gets in the car with Cora. They thank Carter for what he did and drive off quickly because reporters are chasing them. Cora then tells Frank, "I didn't know Nick had life insurance." He apologizes and says, "I didn't mean to hurt you. I love you." Then they return to the diner. From then on, Cora becomes focused only on her work. She doesn't care about what people say about her after what happened, and her relationship with Frank doesn't go back to how it was. But Frank manages to win her love again. One day, someone comes to tell her that her mother is sick and wants to see her, so she says goodbye to Frank and travels to her mother. Time passes, and Frank neglects the diner and doesn't take care of it. One day, a man arrives at the diner and asks Frank to fill his car with gas. Frank asks him where he's going, and the man says he's heading to San Diego to deliver something to the circus. Frank says he wants to go with him. When they arrive at the circus, the driver offers to sell the owner a wild tiger he brought, but the tiger trainer refuses because the tiger is sedated. Frank overhears their conversation, spends the night at the circus, and returns to the diner the next day. A few days later, Cora returns very sad because her mother has died. Frank comforts her. On the way back to the diner, she tells him she wants to have a baby with him. He welcomes the idea, and she becomes very happy. That night, they have dinner together in the diner, and someone knocks on the door. When Frank opens it, he finds Carter's secretary threatening him with the recorded confession that Cora had admitted they killed Nick. He demands $10,000 in exchange for keeping silent. When Frank tells him they already paid Carter his fees, the man pulls out a gun and threatens him, saying, "I don't care about Carter's money. I want the amount I told you. Otherwise, I'll give the confession to the officer who's dying to throw both of you in jail." Frank attacks him, beats him violently, takes the gun, and forces him to reveal where he hid the recording. Frank goes with him to retrieve it. When he returns, he finds the diner empty. He hears a strange noise, takes out the gun, and goes up to Cora's room. There he finds a tiger on the bed. Cora is extremely upset and says, "Your girlfriend from the circus, the one you slept at her place, came to visit you and left you this tiger as a gift." He hands her the confession, and she says, "I don't want anything in this world anymore," and threatens to report what they did to the police. He stops her from leaving, but she walks out anyway and stands alone in front of the diner. He follows her and proposes to her. She accepts, and they go to get married on the same day. After that, they grow closer than before. One day, while they are out on a walk, Cora becomes tired and it appears she is pregnant. Frank tells her he will take her to the doctor to check on her. They get in the car together, and suddenly a truck appears on the road and crashes into them. Cora is thrown out of the car, and Frank stops the car with difficulty. He gets out to check on her, only to discover she is dead. He collapses in tears. It is God's punishment for what they had done.